Chapter 1. You work too much. You're home late again, she said without looking up from her phone. I paused in the doorway, one hand still on the knob, the other holding my keys like they were proof of something, effort, maybe your sacrifice. The living room smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and the candle she liked to light when she was pretending things were calm. The TV murmured in the background, some reality show with people yelling about nothing. I'm doing this for us, I said, setting my briefcase down carefully, like noise might break whatever fragile piece remained. She smirked, not a smile. A smirk sharp, knowing. That's what men always say. I loosened my tie and took a breath. I'd learned to breathe before answering her. Learned it the way you learn to brace before stepping into cold water. I told you this quarter would be heavy. You know how it is. Her thumb flicked across the glass of her phone. Lock screen. Always locked now. Uh-huh, she said. Funny how your job gets heavier every time I say I miss you. That stung more than I let show. I walked into the kitchen, rinsed my hands at the sink even though they weren't dirty. Habit, control, routine, the things I believed kept a man steady. I'm building something, I said. You don't just quit when it gets uncomfortable. She finally looked up then, eyes cool, assessing me like a stranger who'd overstayed his welcome. No, she said lightly. Some people just get replaced. I laughed once, short and forced. Replaced? What is this, a job interview? She shrugged. Everything is, if you think about it. That was new. The casual cruelty. The way she dropped comments like that and watched to see if they landed. A year ago, she would have apologized before the words fully left her mouth. A year ago, she would have stood up to kiss me hello. I opened the fridge. Leftovers sat untouched. She'd eaten already. Again. You eat? I asked. At the gym, she said. Protein bar. Don't wait up. The gym. She'd started going 6 months ago. At first, I'd been proud, encouraging even. Bought her new shoes. Told her she looked strong. Now it felt like the gym had become a place she went not to get healthier, but to disappear. She stood and walked past me, close enough that I caught a different scent on her, something sharper than her usual perfume. I turned instinctively. That new? I asked, nodding at her leggings. She glanced down, then back at me. You notice now? I notice things. Do you? Her eyebrow lifted. Could have fooled me. She headed toward the hallway, hips swaying with a confidence that felt practiced, deliberate, like she wanted to be seen, just not by me. I followed, stopping at the foot of the stairs. What's that supposed to mean? She turned, one hand on the railing. It means you're always tired, always busy, always later. She made air quotes with her fingers. Men like you think loyalty is enough. It is, I said immediately. Too quickly. That's the point. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled again, slow, almost amused. We'll see. Upstairs, the bedroom door closed softly behind her. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I went back to the kitchen and reheated my dinner alone. Later, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked rhythmically above us. She was turned away, phone glowing faintly beneath the covers. The light flickered against the wall like a secret signal. You coming to bed? I asked, even though she was already there. I am in bed, she said flatly. I rolled onto my side, watching the outline of her shoulder, the familiar curve that no longer felt familiar at all. You've been distant, I said carefully. Did I do something? Her laugh was soft but sharp. Is that what this is? You fishing for reassurance? I'm trying to talk to my wife. My husband's trying to talk, she corrected, finally locking the phone and setting it face down. There's a difference. My chest tightened. What's that supposed to mean? She sighed, exaggerated, like I was a problem she was tired of solving. It means I need more than a man who comes home exhausted and thinks paying bills equals intimacy. I swallowed. I thought we were on the same team. She turned then, propping herself on one elbow. Up close, her eyes looked different. Sharper. Hungry for something unnamed. Teams change, she said. People change. I haven't, I said quietly. That's the problem, she replied. Silence stretched between us. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and remind her of all the nights we'd laughed ourselves to sleep, all the plans we'd made on this very bed. But something in her expression warned me not to try. Instead, I nodded. I'll do better. She smiled, not unkindly this time, but not lovingly either. You always say that. The next morning, I woke before dawn. She was already gone, gym bag missing, side of the bed cold. On the nightstand, her phone buzzed once, then went still. Locked. I stood there, staring at it, my hand hovering just above the screen. I didn't touch it. I told myself this was normal. That marriages had seasons. That a man proved his worth by enduring, not accusing. I showered, dressed, made the bed tight and neat like order could anchor me. As I left the house, I glanced back at our bedroom window. The curtains fluttered slightly, though no breeze stirred outside. Marriage isn't about feelings, I reminded myself as I locked the door. It's about staying when things get dull. I just didn't know yet how dangerous dullness could be. Chapter 2. The summer she slipped away. Summer arrived the way it always did, quietly at first, then all at once. The mornings grew brighter earlier, the air heavier by noon. Lawns brown despite sprinklers. Windows stayed open longer. And somewhere between late June and the 4th of July, my wife began slipping out of my hands like warm sand. It started small, innocent looking even. I'm going out with friends after work, she said one Thursday, already halfway to the stairs. I looked up from the sink where I was scrubbing a pan that didn't need scrubbing. Which friends? She paused just long enough to make it feel intentional. Does it matter? That was new. It used to matter. She used to volunteer names, stories, details. Now everything came wrapped in vagueness, like privacy was something I hadn't earned. Drive safe, I said finally. She smiled, satisfied, and disappeared into the bedroom. When she came down 20 minutes later, I barely recognized her. Short dress, bare shoulders, makeup done with a precision she never used for me anymore. She caught me looking and tilted her head. What? She asked. Nothing, I said. You look nice. For once, she replied lightly, then grabbed her keys. The door shut behind her with a finality that lingered in the house long after her engine faded down the street. That became the pattern. Summer nights where the house felt too big. Dinners reheated. Conversations reduced to logistics, bills, trash day, whether the AC was too cold. She started coming home later, sometimes past midnight, smelling like sweat and perfume and something unfamiliar I couldn't name. One night, she walked in laughing. Not the polite laugh she gave me. A full, unguarded one. I was sitting on the couch, lights dimmed, TV muted. Good time? I asked. She glanced at me, still smiling at her phone. You wouldn't like it. Try me. She shook her head, thumbs flying across the screen. You wouldn't get it. The laughter continued, quiet now, contained, like it belonged to someone else entirely. I watched her then, really watched. The way she held herself straighter. The way her steps had a rhythm, a confidence that bordered on challenge. This wasn't happiness. It was something sharper, hungrier. You've been happy lately, I said one evening as we ate in silence. She looked up slowly. Is that a problem? No, I said. Just different. She smiled, a slow curl of her lips. I forgot how much you dislike change. I set my fork down. That's not fair, isn't it? She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. You like things exactly where you left them. Same job, same routines, same wife waiting at home. I thought that was called commitment. She laughed softly. You would. The words safe and predictable entered her vocabulary like knives wrapped in silk. You're a good man, she told me one afternoon while tying her shoes by the door. Stable, reliable. I smiled, relieved. That's good, right? She looked up at me, eyes unreadable. Depend what you want. She was texting constantly now. Phone angled away from me. Screen dimmed the moment I walked into her room. Once while brushing my teeth, I heard her laugh in the bedroom, low, intimate. When I stepped in, she stopped mid-smile. What's funny? I asked. Nothing, she said quickly. Just a meme. Can I see? Her eyes hardened. Why? I just asked. She scoffed. Why do you even care? The question hit harder than any accusation. Because you're my wife, I said. She stared at me for a long second, then shrugged. Am I? Or just someone who sleeps in your house? That night, she turned away from me in bed, scrolling until the glow of her phone faded into darkness. I lay there listening to the hum of the AC, replaying her words until they lost meaning and became noise. I told myself it was a phase. Summer did things to people. Heat made tempers shorter. Time blurred. I doubled down, flowers on the counter, plans for weekends, small touches she either didn't notice or subtly avoided. At a barbecue with neighbors, she barely stood next to me. When someone asked how long we'd been married, she hesitated before answering. Long enough, she said, sipping her drink. I laughed awkwardly. She didn't. Later in the car, I asked, "Did I do something wrong?" She sighed like she'd been waiting for that. "You're always making this about you." "I'm trying to understand." "No," she said. "You're trying to hold on." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That's what husbands do." She looked out the window, the passing streetlights flashing across her face. "Some husbands," she said quietly, "get left behind." The ache in my chest became a constant companion. Not sharp enough to confront, just deep enough to hurt. Every instinct told me something was wrong, but every value I'd ever believed in told me trust meant not interrogating, not snooping, not accusing without proof. So I stayed silent. I watched her slip into clothes she never wore for me. I listened to laughter that didn't include me. I nodded when she said she needed space. I told myself love meant patience. One night, as she headed out again, she kissed my cheek, quick, distant. "Don't wait up," she said. "I never do," I replied. She paused, smiled to herself, and walked out. The door closed. The house settled. And somewhere deep inside me, something shifted quietly, almost imperceptibly. Summer stretched on, and with every passing day, she slipped a little further away, while I stood exactly where I'd always been, trusting a ground that was already giving way beneath my feet. Chapter 3. The man I wasn't supposed to notice. I first heard his name on a Tuesday night, slipped into the conversation like it didn't belong to anyone important. We were in the kitchen. I was chopping onions for dinner, the rhythmic thud of the knife grounding me, when she leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "You know," she said casually, "Evan says that kind of stress isn't healthy." I stopped mid-cut. "Who's Evan?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She didn't look up. "Relax. Just a guy from the gym." The knife resumed its work, but my attention didn't. A guy from the gym. The phrase echoed longer than it should have. I told myself it meant nothing. People talked. Gyms were social. That was normal. "Funny," I said. "I didn't know you were taking health advice from strangers." She smiled at something on her screen. "He's not a stranger. We talk." There it was. Not an admission. Not a confession. Just enough to unsettle. Over dinner, his name surfaced again. "Evan thinks routines like yours burn men out by 40. I raised an eyebrow. "Evan seems to know a lot about me." She finally looked up then, eyes bright with something like amusement. "I tell him things." My stomach tightened. "You tell him what kind of things?" She shrugged. "Life. Marriage. You know, adult stuff." I didn't know. Or maybe I didn't want to. From that night on, Evan became a presence without ever entering the room. A shadow stretched across conversations that used to be ours alone. Whenever we argued, his name hovered just beneath the surface. "You're too rigid," she snapped one evening when I reminded her we'd planned dinner together. "Evan says flexibility is what keeps people exciting." I clenched my jaw. Why does his opinion matter so much? She rolled her eyes. "Because he's ambitious. He actually takes risks. And that makes him an expert on our marriage." "No," she said, smiling thinly. "It makes him interesting." That word, interesting, felt like a verdict. I started noticing how she spoke about him. Not directly, never openly, but in comparisons disguised as observations. "He switched careers at 35, she said once, like she was discussing the weather. Just decided he wanted more." "More than what?" I asked. She glanced at me, then settling. I laughed, though nothing was funny. "You think I settled?" She didn't answer. Silence did it for her. The gym became sacred ground, off limits to questions. If I asked how her workout went, she'd answer vaguely. If I asked who she trained with, she accused me of paranoia. "You're imagining things," she said one night, arms crossed. "You're insecure because you don't understand that people can have friendships." "With men?" I asked. "With anyone," she snapped. "God, you sound old. Old. Predictable. Safe." I began to see how carefully she used him. like a measuring stick I always came up short against. When I suggested a vacation, she said, "Evan says experiences matter more than possessions. You're always worried about money." When I worked late, she scoffed. He'd never let a job run his life. I wanted to scream that Evan didn't pay our mortgage, that Evan didn't fix the leaky sink or wake up early to keep promises. But every defense sounded weak, outdated, like I was arguing for a world that no longer existed. One night, after a few glasses of wine, she grew bolder. "You know," she said, swirling her drink, "most men would be worried." "About what?" I asked. She smiled, slow and deliberate. "About losing their wives." My chest tightened. "Are you trying to scare me?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "If I were cheating," she said lightly, "you'd never know." The words landed hard. Casual. Cruel. I stared at her. "That's not funny." She took a sip, eyes never leaving mine. "I didn't say it was." That line stayed with me long after she went to bed. It replayed in my head while I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around us. If I were cheating, you'd never know. I started noticing patterns I'd ignored before. The way she angled her phone away when she texted. The way she smiled at messages, then looked bored when she looked at me. The way she dressed differently on gym days, more deliberate, more daring. Once, I caught a glimpse of her phone lighting up on the counter. A name flashed across the screen before it locked. Evan. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Something in me feared that crossing that line would end whatever fragile balance we still had. Instead, I asked questions. "Do you talk to him a lot?" I asked one Saturday morning. She didn't even look up from tying her shoes. "Why?" "I'm just curious." She straightened, meeting my eyes. "That's not curiosity. That's control. I'm your husband. And I'm not your property," she replied sharply. "You don't get to interrogate me because some guy's name makes you uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable because you talk about him more than you talk to me." She laughed again, short, dismissive. "That's because he listens." The words cut deeper than any accusation. I watched her leave, the door clicking shut behind her, and wondered when listening had stopped being enough. Evan became the man I wasn't supposed to notice, yet couldn't stop seeing everywhere. In her confidence, in her impatience, in the way she seemed to test boundaries just to watch me react. Sometimes, she looked at me like she was daring me to catch her. Other times, like she already believed she'd won something I didn't know we were competing for. And still, I told myself I was imagining things. That trust meant restraint. That love meant giving space even when it hurt. But every time she said his name, something inside me shifted quietly, irrevocably. Evan wasn't just a guy from the gym. He was a signal, and I was only just beginning to understand what he meant. Chapter 4. Signs Men Ignore. The signs didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They crept in quietly, disguised as coincidences, as bad timing, as the harmless side effects of a busy life. Signs men like me were trained to ignore. The first was time, how it slipped through my fingers whenever she was involved. "I'll be home by 8, she said one Friday, already reaching for her purse. I glanced at the clock. 6:30. "Dinner." She hesitated. "Don't wait. It might run late." It ran past 10, then 11. When she finally came through the door, the house was dark except for the lamp by the couch where I sat pretending to read. "You okay?" she asked, kicking off her shoes. "Fine," I said. "You said 8. She frowned. "Plans change. They always do now," I replied. She didn't answer. She never did when silence worked better. Then came the passwords. One morning, I picked up her tablet to check the weather, something I'd done 100 times before. The screen blinked, then prompted for a code. I stared at it longer than I should have. "That's new," I said when she walked into the kitchen. She poured herself coffee without looking at me. "Everyone uses passwords." "You didn't." "I do now." "What?" She finally met my eyes, irritation flashing across her face. "Why does that matter to you?" The question was backwards. Everything felt backwards lately. "I just asked," I said. "And I answered," she replied. "Drop it." So I did. I always did. The bedroom went cold next. Not literally, though she insisted on keeping the thermostat lower, but emotionally, like a room abandoned too long. Touches disappeared. Kisses became obligations. When I reached for her at night, she sighed like I'd asked her to do something inconvenient. "I'm tired," she said. "I won't take long." I joked once, trying to keep it light. She rolled away from me. "God, you always make it about that." I lay there afterward, staring into the dark, wondering when wanting my wife had become an offense. Days passed where we didn't touch at all. Weeks where intimacy was replaced with logistics and silence. I try not to count. Counting made it real. Her criticism changed too. Sharper, more personal. "You're too cautious," she said one night as I balanced the checkbook. "Someone has to be," I replied. She scoffed. "That's your problem. You think playing it safe makes you a man." I looked up slowly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're predictable," she said. "You don't take risks. You don't surprise anyone." "I surprise you," I said quietly. "I'm still here." She laughed. "That's not a surprise. That's an obligation." The word hung between us like smoke. I started replaying conversations in my head at work, missing details, tone shifts, moments I'd brushed aside. Men like me were raised to believe accusations without proof were weakness. That real strength meant endurance. Silence. Control. But control felt like suffocation now. One evening, she left her phone on the counter while she showered. It buzzed once. Twice. A name flashed briefly before the screen dimmed. I stood there, dish towel in my hands, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the running water upstairs. This was it. The moment every warning voice inside me screamed about. I picked up the phone. It was warm, recently used, locked. My thumb hovered over the screen, muscle memory, itching to swipe. I knew her old passcode. Birthdays were hard to forget. If I look, I thought, I'd change everything. I imagined what would come next. Arguments, denials, the shattering of whatever illusion we were still standing on. I imagined seeing something I couldn't unsee. I set the phone back down exactly where it was. That night, she climbed into bed without a word, scrolling until the glow disappeared. "You didn't say good night," I said. She sighed. "Do we really need rituals?" "They're not rituals," I replied. "They're habits." "Same thing," she said. "And habits get boring." I turned onto my back, staring at the ceiling. Men like me get punished for loyalty, I thought. We build a house, then get locked out. The next day, she criticized the way I dressed. "You wear that to work every day," she said, wrinkling her nose. "It's professional. It's safe," she corrected. "You ever think about doing something bold?" "I have responsibilities," I said. She smiled thinly. "That's your excuse for everything." Even my silence offended her now. "Say something." She snapped during dinner when I didn't respond quickly enough. "I'm listening." "No," she said. "You're retreating." I wanted to tell her I felt like a guest in my own marriage, that I was afraid any wrong word would push her further away. Instead, I nodded. "You're right," I said. "I'll try harder." She softened then, just a little, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "But I need more." "More than what?" I asked. She withdrew her hand. "You wouldn't understand." That night, I dreamed of standing outside my own house, keys in hand, lights on inside, laughter drifting through the windows. No matter how hard I knocked, no one answered. When I woke, she was already gone. The signs kept stacking up, missing hours, locked screens, sharp words where affection used to live. Each one alone was explainable. Together, they formed a picture I refused to look at directly. Because looking meant admitting that trust might not be enough. And men like me were taught that once trust broke, everything followed. So I stayed loyal, stayed blind, stayed silent. And every day, I ignored the signs. I told myself I was being strong, never realizing how close strength was to becoming my undoing. Chapter 5, The Day the World Split. The garage smelled like oil and dust, and the faint sweetness of cut grass. I liked it that way. Orderly. Predictable. I had the radio on low, some talk show arguing about things that didn't matter, while I sorted through a box of old tools I kept meaning to organize. It was late morning, the kind of quiet hour where the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. No cars. No kids. Just the hum of summer heat settling in. I was elbow deep in rags when the knock came. Not loud. Not urgent, just firm enough to demand attention. I wiped my hands on my jeans and glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:30. I wasn't expecting anyone. She'd gone out early, said she was tired, said she'd come back and nap. I hadn't questioned it. I never did anymore. The knock came again. I walked to the door, already rehearsing some polite excuse. When I opened it, a uniform filled the frame. Blue. Badge. A man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a posture trained to deliver bad news. "Sir," he said. "Yes. I'm Officer Reynolds. Do you live here with your wife?" Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Yes." He took a breath, the kind that pulls air all the way down to the ribs. "Sir, your wife was in a fatal car accident an hour ago." The words didn't land. They floated, disconnected, like dialogue from a show playing in another room. I smiled, actually smiled, because that was the only response that made sense. "No," I said. "She's upstairs asleep." The officer blinked. "Just once." "Sir, she came home early." I continued, my voice steady, logical. "Said she wasn't feeling well. She's in our bed." There was a pause. A long one. I could hear a lawnmower start up somewhere down the block. Life uninterrupted. "Sir," he said carefully, "we have confirmed identification. Your wife's vehicle was struck at an intersection on Route 6. She was pronounced dead at the scene." Dead. The word hit harder the second time. "You're mistaken," I said. "You have the wrong house." He glanced down at a notepad, then back up at me. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. The house felt suddenly different with him in it. Smaller, like the walls had leaned in. He took in the living room quickly. Photos on the mantle, the framed wedding picture where she was laughing, and I looked proud in that quiet way men do when they think they've won something permanent. "She's upstairs," I said, already walking. "I'll show you." He followed, boots heavy on the hardwood. Halfway up the stairs, I heard him speak into his radio, low and clipped. "Procedure. Control." At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out, doors closed, light spilling from the bedroom at the end. The door was open a crack. "She's right there," I said. Relief crept in despite everything. Proof waited for us. Flesh and breath and warmth. The officer would apologize. Leave. This nightmare would collapse under its own stupidity. As we walked closer, something changed. I felt it before I understood it. The officer slowing, his hand moving subtly toward his hip. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Sir," he said quietly, "please stay behind me." "Why?" He didn't answer. He pushed the door open with his foot. She was in bed, on her side, sheets pulled up to her waist. Hair spread across the pillow exactly the way it always was when she slept deeply. Her chest rose and fell. Slow. Natural. "There," I said, my voice almost triumphant. "I told you." The officer froze. For a moment, no one moved. The room hummed with the low sound of the ceiling fan. Dust motes floated in the sunlight. Then the officer drew his weapon. The metallic click was deafening. "Sir," he said sharply, "step away from her." "That isn't don't." I snapped, instinct overriding fear. "What the hell are you doing?" "That's my wife." His gun was trained on the bed. "On her." "Sir," he repeated, "I need you to step back. Now." I took a step forward instead. "You said she was dead." "She's right there. Breathing. Warm." "I know what I said," he replied, voice tight. "And I know what I saw." "What does that mean?" His eyes flicked to her face, then back to me. "The woman who died matches her exactly." "That's impossible," I said. My heart was pounding now, loud and erratic. "You're standing in my house, pointing a gun at my wife." "Lower it." She stirred then. A small movement. A soft sound in her throat. "See," I said. "She's waking up." Her eyes fluttered open. For a split second, relief flooded me, so completely I almost collapsed. Then she looked at the officer, at the gun, at me. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. The officer's grip tightened. "Ma'am," he said, "don't move." She frowned. "Why is there a police officer in our bedroom?" I turned to him, anger cutting through the confusion. "You see? You're wrong. Call it in. Fix it." He shook his head slowly, like a man watching a rule of the world break in front of him. "Sir," he said, "the body at the crash site. She has your wife's ID. Her fingerprints. Her dental records." "That's not possible." I said again, weaker now. The woman in the bed pushed herself up slightly, sheets rustling. "What crash?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" "Please," I said to the officer. "You're scaring her." He didn't lower the gun. "Sir," he said, choosing each word carefully, "the coroner signed the time of death an hour ago." An hour ago. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 10:30. My knees felt unsteady. "That can't be," I whispered. She reached for my arm. Her hand was warm. Familiar. "Hey," she said softly. "What's wrong?" The officer's voice cut through the moment like glass. "Sir," step away from her. "That isn't," he stopped, because he didn't know how to finish the sentence. "Not a person. Not alive. Not human. Not possible." We stood there, three of us, trapped in a moment that refused to make sense. My wife, breathing in our bed. A police officer, holding proof of her death. And me, caught between them, realizing that something fundamental had just cracked. The world didn't end with noise or fire. It split quietly, right there in our bedroom, while my wife, officially dead, looked up at me and asked why everyone was staring at her like she didn't belong. Chapter 6, 2 Deaths, 1 Marriage. By the time the second squad car arrived, the house no longer felt like mine. Yellow tape cut across the front yard like a wound. Radios crackled. Shoes tracked dust through the hallway I had vacuumed the night before. The officer, Reynolds, never lowered his weapon until 2 more uniforms stood beside him, eyes fixed on the woman sitting up in my bed, wrapped in our sheets like she belonged there. She looked at them with irritation more than fear. "Is someone going to explain why my husband let armed strangers into our bedroom?" she asked. One of the younger officers swallowed. "Ma'am, what's your name?" She glanced at me, then back at him. "You already know my name." They exchanged looks. That quiet, professional language of people who had seen enough wrongness to recognize it instantly. I sat on the edge of a chair in the corner while they separated us. "Procedure," they said. "Just routine." Nothing about this felt routine. They took her downstairs. I heard drawers open. Cabinets. The sound of my life being handled with gloves. An hour later, Reynolds sat across from me at the dining table. He slid a folder forward but didn't open it. "Sir," he said, "I need you to understand something. Your wife was killed in a collision at 9:21 a.m. The vehicle was registered to her. Her license was on her person." I rubbed my temples. "You've said that." "She was identified at the scene by dental records," he continued. "Fingerprints matched. There is no ambiguity about the body." My voice cracked despite my effort. "Then who is in my house?" Reynolds hesitated. "That's what we're trying to determine." Forensics came and went. Photos were taken. Samples collected. They swabbed the bathroom sink, the bed sheets, her toothbrush. DNA, they said, but results would take time. Always took time. Neighbors were questioned. Mrs. Halloway from next door twisted her hands nervously. "I saw her car pull in this morning," she said. "Same one she always drives." She waved at me. "What time?" Reynolds asked. "Little after 9. "That's impossible," another officer muttered under his breath. I want to scream that everything about today was impossible. They let me see her again in the early afternoon. She was sitting on the couch now, posture perfect, legs crossed like she was waiting for an appointment. When she saw me, she smiled. Not warmly. Assessing. "They treating you okay?" she asked. I stood a few feet away, afraid of what would happen if I got closer. "Who are you?" Her brow furrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "Answer it." She laughed softly. "I'm your wife." "No," I said. "My wife died this morning." Her smile thinned. "Then you should be crying instead of interrogating me." I searched her face, every freckle, every familiar line. She looked exactly the same, sounded the same, even smelled the same. "Tell me something only she would know," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You proposed to me on a rainy night because you forgot the ring and panicked. You burned the lasagna on our first anniversary. You grind your teeth when you're stressed." I flinched. She leaned forward. "Do you want me to keep going?" I shook my head slowly. "Then why does this feel wrong?" Her gaze sharpened. "Because you're finally paying attention." The longer I watched her, the more the differences emerged, not in appearance, but in presence. My wife used to soften a room when she entered it. This woman sharpened it. She answered questions too precisely, corrected officers when they misspoke, smiled at moments that didn't warrant smiling. Later, When they asked about a trip we took to Colorado, she paused. We went in winter, she said. I swallowed. It was spring. You hated the snow. She blinked once. Right. Spring. I misspoke. But she didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed. Her eyes met mine then, steady, unblinking, not searching for reassurance, studying me. By evening, the house emptied out, leaving behind the echo of what had been said. Reynolds told me she would stay for now. No grounds to remove her, he explained. No crime she could be charged with. Not yet. Sir, he said quietly before leaving, I recommend you don't be alone with her tonight. The door closed. Silence rushed back in. She stood in the living room, arms folded. So, she said, am I sleeping on the couch like some kind of suspect? I laughed weakly. You don't think any of this is strange? She tilted her head. I think you're dramatic. I followed her upstairs, every step heavy. In the bedroom, she sat on the bed like she owned it. You look scared, she said. That's new. I'll watch you die today, I whispered. No, she corrected. You were told I died. That body wasn't me, she said sharply. I'm right here. I searched her eyes again. They were the right color, the wrong depth. You don't remember our first apartment, I said suddenly. She frowned. Of course I do. What color was the kitchen? She opened her mouth, then closed it. White. It was yellow, I said. You hated it. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, the mask slipped. Then she smiled. You always cared about details, she said. That's why this hurts you more than it should. What are you? I asked. She stood, stepping close enough that I could feel her warmth. Her voice dropped. You finally noticed me, she said. Too bad it's too late. A chill ran through me. Noticed who? She brushed past me, settling back into bed, pulling the sheets up like a queen claiming her throne. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow will be worse. I stood there long after she closed her eyes, listening to her breathe, realizing something horrifyingly clear. Whether my wife had died once or twice didn't matter anymore. The marriage I knew was gone, and whatever had come back, wearing her face wasn't here to save it. Chapter 7. The Truth She Couldn't Hide. Truth has a way of surfacing even when people try to bury it under paperwork, silence, and plausible lies. It doesn't rush. It waits until you're tired enough to stop fighting it. The call came 3 days after the crash. I was sitting at the dining table, staring at a coffee cup gone cold, when my phone vibrated. Detective Morales. The name felt heavier than it should have. Mr. Harris, he said when I answered, voice clipped but careful. We need you to come down to the station. My eyes drifted to the staircase. She was upstairs. Quiet. Too quiet. About my wife? I asked. About the accident, he said, and the man who was with her. I drove myself. I didn't tell her where I was going. She didn't ask. At the station, Morales laid the facts out slowly, like he was afraid I'd brake if he moved too fast. The other vehicle involved in the crash was registered to an Evan Walker, he said, sliding a photo across the table. Mid-30s. Gym trainer. No prior record. I stared at the picture. Strong jaw. Confident smile. The kind of man she described with words like ambitious and bold. My hands curled into fists. He survived? Morales nodded. Barely. Broken ribs. Concussion. But he's talking. What did he say? That they were arguing, Morales replied. Witnesses heard shouting at the intersection. Your wife was driving. My throat tightened. Arguing about what? Morales hesitated. About you. The room felt suddenly smaller. Go on. She was pregnant, he said quietly. The word hit like a physical blow. No, I whispered. That's not possible. She hadn't told you, he said gently. But medical reports confirm it. Early stage. I laughed once, sharp, broken. She didn't want children. She said. Morales looked at me with something like pity. People say a lot of things to keep their lives from colliding. I drove home in a fog. Every memory reassembled itself differently now. The gym, the distance, the coldness, the laughter that didn't include me. When I walked into the house, she was standing in the kitchen, calm as ever, sipping tea. You're late, she said. I dropped my keys on the counter. I know about Evan. She didn't flinch. I know about the accident, I continued. About the argument. About the baby. Her eyes darkened, not with guilt, but with irritation. You went digging. The police did, I said. I just listened. She set the cup down carefully. And I want the truth. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled, slow, almost affectionate. Which version? I stepped closer. Who are you? She exhaled, a sound like she'd been waiting for this. That depends on what you can handle. I swallowed. Start talking. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. Your wife loved stability, loved what you built. The house, the routine, the safety. And Evan, I asked. Her smile sharpened. Evan made her feel alive. The words burned. She didn't plan to die, she went on. None of us ever do. Us? I asked. She laughed softly. There it is. You're closer than you think. Are you her twin? I demanded. Some kind of insurance scam? What the hell is this? She tilted her head, eyes glinting. What would you prefer? I stared at her. The truth. She pushed off the counter and walked past me toward the door. Truth isn't always singular. Don't do that, I said. Don't speak in riddles. She paused at the doorway. Fine. Here's something simple. She turned back to face me. She didn't love you. The sentence landed with devastating clarity. She respected you, she continued. Admired your discipline, your loyalty. You were useful, dependable. I felt my chest tighten. Stop. She slept with what she desired, she finished calmly. The room spun. I shook my head. You're lying. Am I? She asked softly. Ask yourself. When was the last time she looked at you the way she looked at her phone? I couldn't answer. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You were never the secret. You were the structure. Evan was the escape. Then who are you? I whispered. She smiled sadly. Someone who knew her better than you ever did. I backed away. You're not staying here. I was never meant to, she replied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of keys, my wife's keys, and placed them on the counter. They'll find enough to close the case, she said. An affair. A crash. A tragedy. And you? I asked. She headed for the door. I disappear. She stopped with her hand on the knob. One last thing. I didn't want to hear it. I needed to hear it. She chose you for the life, she said without turning around. She chose him for the feeling. The door opened. Sunlight spilled in. Goodbye, she said. Then she was gone. I stood alone in the quiet house, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Respect without love. Loyalty without desire. I sank into a chair, hands shaking, understanding finally settling in. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the truth she'd hidden so well that even death couldn't contain it. Chapter 8. A man rebuilt in silence. The silence came first. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that settles after laughter, but the hollow kind, where every sound reminds you of what's missing. The house echoed now. Footsteps lingered too long. Doors closed with a finality that felt personal. Her things were gone. Closet half empty. Bathroom stripped of perfumes and lotions. The imprint of her life remained in dust outlines and faded spaces, like a crime scene that had been cleaned too thoroughly. I walked from room to room, touching objects that no longer mattered. The couch where we used to sit on opposite ends. The kitchen table where conversations died mid-sentence. The marriage hadn't ended in a fight. It had been erased. Friends started calling, not to comfort, but to classify. I just don't know what to say, Mark said awkwardly over the phone. You don't have to say anything, I replied. Well, people are talking. Some stopped calling altogether. Others offered sympathy that felt conditional, as if loyalty were a temporary loan. A few quietly drifted toward the version of the story that felt easier to digest. She must have been unhappy, someone said at a gathering I left early. He was always working, another added, not realizing I could hear. I didn't argue. Arguing required energy I no longer wasted on people who hadn't stood in my house when the truth ripped through it. The job went next. I sat in my manager's office on a gray Monday morning, hands folded, posture calm. You're one of our best, he said. You sure about this? I nodded. I built my life around a job that didn't notice when my marriage collapsed. I'm done. He blinked. You're walking away from security. No, I said. I'm walking toward myself. I handed him my badge. Walked out without ceremony. No exit speech. No bitterness. Just clarity. The first weeks after felt wrong. Mornings without urgency. Afternoons without deadlines. Time stretched uncomfortably wide. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be and no one to impress. So I started with my body. The gym became a place of reckoning, not escape. I lifted heavy and slow, letting pain replace rumination. Sweat drowned out memories. I trained early mornings when the world was quiet and expectations were asleep. An older man spotted me one day. "Rough year," he asked between sets. I nodded. He smiled knowingly. "Good. Pain makes honest men dangerous in the right way." I started reading books I'd always meant to but never had time for. Philosophy, psychology, history. I learned how often men confuse endurance with virtue, how silence can be strength or self-erasure. At night, instead of lying awake replaying conversations I wrote, not letters to her, not questions, just truths. I ignored my intuition because I thought loyalty meant blindness. I confused being needed with being loved. I gave everything to something that never asked me who I was becoming. The anger came, but it didn't stay. Anger burned fast. Clarity burned clean. One afternoon, I ran into her sister at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. I didn't know what to believe. I met her eyes. "That's okay. Belief is easier than truth." She hesitated. "She talk about you a lot." "I know," I replied. "Just not to me." I walked away without waiting for a response. Weeks turned into months. My reflection changed. Not just physically, though the mirror showed broader shoulders, steadier eyes, but internally. I stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped measuring my worth by someone else's appetite for me. One evening, while reorganizing the garage, I found an old photo of us. Smiling. Young. Promises intact. I studied it for a long time. Then I put it in a box and closed the lid. No ceremony. No tears. Just acceptance. I sold the house soon after. Too many ghosts. Too many echoes. I moved into a smaller place. Clean, intentional mind. The first night there, I slept deeper than I had in years. No phone buzzing. No footsteps leaving. No waiting. People noticed the change. "You seem lighter," a woman at a cafe remarked after a conversation that didn't feel forced. "Stronger," a friend corrected. I smiled. Both. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I wasn't trying to be chosen. I wasn't auditioning for love. I had chosen myself. One morning, standing by the window as sunlight spilled across the floor, the thought arrived fully formed and undeniable. I stopped trying to be chosen. I chose myself. And for the first time since the world split open, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It felt like peace. Chapter 9. Justice without blood. Justice didn't arrive with sirens or fists or shouted confessions. It arrived quietly, the way truth always does when it's finally given room to breathe. I didn't plan to expose anything at first. For weeks after I rebuilt my life, I focused on staying clean, mentally, emotionally. I told myself that moving on was victory enough, that silence was dignity. But silence, I learned, only works when lies aren't still feeding on it. The first crack came from an insurance company. A letter arrived one afternoon, thick and official. I almost tossed it aside, assuming it was another procedural delay. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and opened it carefully. There were discrepancies, they said, conflicting beneficiary claims, anomalies in documentation submitted shortly before my wife's death. I read the letter twice. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was inevitable. They asked to meet. The investigator was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and no patience for drama. "Your wife made changes to her policy 3 months before the accident," she said, sliding papers across the table. "Increased coverage, added contingencies, named secondary parties." "Evan," I said flatly. She nodded. "He was listed under a business entity connected to a gym investment. Shell company. Poorly hidden." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "She planned to disappear. Or profit," the investigator replied. "Possibly both." From there, the truth accelerated like it had been waiting for permission. Emails surfaced. Gym records. Financial transfers disguised as training fees. phone records that showed late-night calls routed through encrypted apps, lies stacked on top of lies, all carefully arranged to look like coincidence. Evan didn't take it well. He tried to deny everything at first, claimed grief, confusion, bad timing. But when the evidence grew teeth, his confidence collapsed. I saw him once, unexpectedly, outside the courthouse. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His posture, once arrogant, expansive, now folded inward like a man trying not to be seen. He recognized me immediately. "Hey," he said hoarsely. "Can we talk?" I stopped a few feet away. "About what?" He swallowed. I didn't know it would end like this. I studied him. This was the man she'd risked everything for. The embodiment of desire she'd chosen over loyalty. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I said calmly. "She told me you didn't love her," he blurted. "That you were cold. That you only cared about work." I nodded. "She told me a lot of things, too." He clenched his jaw. "She said she was trapped. And you believed her," I replied, "because it made you feel important." He flinched. "They're taking everything," he said quietly. "My business. My reputation." I met his eyes. "No, you gave it away." I walked past him without another word. The exposure wasn't loud, but it was thorough. The insurance investigation triggered a criminal one. Fraud, conspiracy, misrepresentation. Evan's name began circulating in places it didn't belong: court documents, regulatory filings, whispered conversations at the gym where he once strutted. The gym distanced itself within days. His investors vanished. Friends stopped returning calls. As for her, her name didn't need to be dragged through the mud. It simply settled where it belonged. I corrected the narrative when it mattered. When someone said, "She must have been confused," I replied, "She was calculated." When someone said, "She loved you in her own way," I answered, "Love doesn't require deception." I didn't scream, didn't rant, didn't perform grief for an audience that wanted tragedy more than truth. I told the facts, and facts, spoken calmly, have a way of dismantling fantasies. One evening, a mutual friend called. "I didn't know," he said, "about the fraud, about the affair. I feel stupid defending her." "You weren't stupid," I replied. "You were trusting." There was a pause. "How are you so steady?" I thought about it for a moment. Because I didn't poison myself trying to punish them. The final hearing came and went without spectacle. Evan avoided my eyes the entire time. I didn't look at him either. I wasn't there for him. I was there to close a chapter. When it was over, I walked outside into the sunlight and felt something settle inside me. Not triumph, not vengeance, closure. That night, I went home and deleted the last remaining photos of her from my phone. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. She didn't deserve mourning. She deserved understanding. Understanding that loyalty without honesty is manipulation. That desire without integrity is destruction. That betrayal doesn't require hatred to be defeated, only exposure. I poured myself a drink and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. I thought about revenge. How easy it would have been to let rage guide me. To humiliate. To scream. To burn everything down just to feel powerful again. But rage is a debt that keeps collecting interest. I chose something else. I chose to survive clean. No blood on my hands. No lies on my conscience. No bitterness rooting itself in my future. Justice didn't make me whole, but it cleared the ground. And that was enough. Chapter 10, The Bed She Never Owned. The bedroom smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. A strange, clean scent that made the ghosts feel smaller. I stood in the center of the room, watching two men assemble a new bed frame. The old one, the one she had claimed, that carried both intimacy and betrayal, was gone. Sold, discarded, burned away like the memories that had once attached themselves to it. I ran my hands over the new headboard, smooth, unblemished, unclaimed. There was something grounding about the deliberate weight of it, the way the mattress pressed into the frame and held its shape. I remembered every night spent waiting, every morning waking alone in a body that had once shared warmth I no longer recognized. The men worked efficiently, speaking little. I appreciated that. No one wanted to talk about the life that had collapsed here. "Almost done," one of them said, tightening a bolt. Just the headboard now. I nodded, standing back to watch the bed take form. The sheets, crisp, white, freshly laundered, smelled faintly of lavender. I thought about how once the scent of her shampoo had clung to the pillows, soft and perfumed. That had been a lie too, I realized now. A subtle trick of memory I'd played on myself because I wanted comfort. I walked to the window, sunlight streaking across the floorboards. Dust motes danced lazily in the air, almost serene, almost forgiving. A neighbor waved from across the street. I waved back. She had seen the chaos unfold in our home over the months, the investigation, the police, the lies that had filled this space. But now, even they could feel the difference. The house was calm. I was calm. I touched the new mattress lightly. It held weight differently than the old one. Not heavy, not burdensome. Balanced. Steady. Something I hadn't felt in years. A voice from the doorway startled me. Thinking about her again, I turned. It was Mark, a friend who had stayed after the storm, the one who didn't pick sides, the one who just understood. "I'm thinking about the life she never gave me," I said softly. He nodded. "Seems like you're doing okay without it." I smiled faintly, a little wry, a little real. "Better than okay. I'm building one that's mine." Mark glanced around the room, noting the absence of old trinkets, the minimalism of the space. "And it's just furniture now. No ghosts." "Exactly," I said. "No ghosts. Only foundations." I sat on the edge of the new mattress, feeling the spring beneath me. Solid, reliable, honest. The contrast was almost painful at first, the stark difference between this and what had been here. The old bed, the bed she had slept in while secrets thrived, while deception breathed between the sheets. That bed had carried betrayal like a quiet, invisible weight. I closed my eyes and inhaled the clean air. I remembered the last time I'd sat here, when the other woman, the duplicate, the imposter, had smirked across me with that cruel certainty. She had whispered truths wrapped in torment. She didn't love you. She respected what you built and slept with what she desired. It had taken months to untangle the devastation from my life. Months to stop replaying every interaction, every laugh, every subtle comparison. Months to confront the harsh reality that love and loyalty weren't the same thing, and that devotion could be weaponized against you. Now, with this bed, the room felt like permission to rebuild. I looked at the walls. They were bare, freshly painted in muted gray. No traces of her presence, no reminders of laughter or lies. I could finally see space where I could place myself without fear or guilt. I thought about the months since the crash, since the revelation, since the imposter vanished with her last cutting words. The world had tilted violently on its axis, yet here I was, still standing. I ran my hands along the new sheets again, testing their softness. I remembered lying awake on the old mattress, wishing I could feel safe. Now I was safe, not because someone else protected me, but because I had taken the space for myself. Mark cleared his throat. "Going to sleep here tonight?" I nodded. "First time in years, I'll be able to without dread." He smirked. "You've earned it." I watched him leave, the sound of the door clicking behind him resonating in the quiet house. Alone again, I stretched my legs across the mattress, feeling the comfort settle beneath me. For the first time, it wasn't borrowed comfort. It wasn't a refuge built on illusions. It was real. I sat there for a long time, thinking about the life she had stolen through her choices and the life I had lost in my devotion. I realized something critical. The pain had shaped me, but it hadn't broken me. I laughed quietly at myself. Years I had been loyal, patient, forgiving, sometimes to a fault. And for what? For her illusions? For Evan's thrill? For a marriage that had never been fully mine? Now I understood. Loyalty wasn't weakness. It wasn't a crime. It was the foundation I had built for someone who couldn't respect it. And now, that foundation was mine to reclaim. I lay down fully on the mattress, letting my body sink into the firmness, feeling the weight distributed evenly. My chest rose and fell, deep breaths grounding me. The world outside would continue to spin, filled with lies and duplicity, but here, in this room, I had control. I thought about the months of reconstruction, body, mind, heart. I had trained myself to face life without needing permission. I had learned to find peace in solitude, confidence in action, clarity in reflection. I had survived her betrayals, Evan's arrogance, the imposter's taunts. And now I had emerged whole. I ran my hand along the pillow, imagining it free of her hair, her scent, her presence, free of the weight of false memories. A bed that was finally just a bed and nothing more. As sunlight slanted across the floorboards, I closed my eyes. The hum of the city, distant and steady, was comforting. I had earned this quiet. I had earned this space. And with a final thought, clear and unwavering, I whispered to myself, loyal men don't lose everything. They lose illusions and gain their lives back. I let the words linger, feeling their truth settle in my chest. I wasn't haunted anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself. The bed beneath me was proof. The room around me, a testament. The life ahead, mine, entirely mine, was waiting. And for the first time in years, I slept not as a man betrayed, but as a man rebuilt.